The Velter Grand Fleet stretched across 3-star systems like a metallic constellation of death. 10,000 ships moved in perfect synchronization, their crystalline hulls gleaming with energy fields that could deflect any known weapon. For 7 centuries, no force in the galaxy had even scratched their armor, let alone broken their formation. Commander Velthara stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominion's Edge, watching the holographic display with cold satisfaction. Each vessel pulsed with a soft blue light, connected to every other ship through quantum entanglement communicators. The network was flawless, every captain's thought synchronized, every weapon's firing sequence coordinated to the nanosecond, every shield matrix reinforcing its neighbors. Status report, Velthara commanded, her 4 eyes scanning the tactical display. All systems optimal, Commander, replied her tactical officer. The human colonies of Kepler 442 and Ross 128 have fallen, estimated casualties, 4 billion. No Velter losses. The numbers meant nothing to Velthara. Humans were insects, their chaotic minds incapable of the discipline required for true warfare. They fought with individual initiative, improvisation, and emotion weaknesses that the Velter had systematically eliminated from the military doctrine. 2 millennia ago, deep within the bowels of the flagship, in a maintenance shaft barely wide enough for a human torso, Marcus Rivera held his breath as the Velter technician passed overhead. His heart hammered against his ribs, but he forced himself to remain still. 3 weeks ago, he'd been chief engineer aboard the human cruiser Defiance when the Velter had captured it. During the massacre at Perseions Station, instead of executing him, they put him to work maintaining their impossible technology, a decision they would soon regret. Marcus had spent every waking moment studying their systems, pretending to be broken and compliant while his engineer's mind dissected their greatest achievement, the quantum command network that made their fleet invincible. Each ship was a node in a vast neural web, sharing processing power, sensor data, and tactical analysis instantaneously across light years. It was beautiful in its efficiency and terrifying in its implications. But Marcus had found something the Velter's perfect minds had overlooked. In their obsession with synchronization, they created a single point of failure. The quantum entanglement required all nodes to maintain identical vibrational frequencies. If one ship's frequency shifted even slightly, the entire network would attempt to autocorrect, creating a cascade effect that would propagate through every connected vessel. The Velter considered such a scenario impossible. Their technology was flawless, their maintenance protocols perfect, their ship's quantum core stable beyond any conceivable failure. They couldn't imagine that someone might deliberately introduce chaos into their perfect system. Marcus smiled grimly as he crawled through the ventilation shaft toward the quantum core chamber. The Velter were right about one thing: humans were chaotic. They fought with emotion, made impossible decisions, and refused to accept defeat even when logic demanded surrender. These weren't weaknesses, they were humanity's greatest strengths. Behind him, the war continued. The Velter fleet moved toward Earth with mechanical precision, each ship a cog in their perfect war machine. Ahead lay the quantum core that synchronized this particular node with the rest of the network, and in Marcus's toolkit was a small device that would introduce a frequency modulation so that the Velter's sensors wouldn't detect it until it was far too late. The Armada was flawless, but Marcus Rivera was about to prove that even perfection had its limits. The quantum core chamber hummed with energy that made Marcus's teeth ache. The Velter quantum cores were marvels of engineering, crystalline structures the size of small buildings that existed partially in normal space and partially in 11 other dimensions. Their harmonic resonance was so precise that they could maintain quantum entanglement across galactic distances without degradation. Marcus crouched behind a support strut, watching the automated maintenance drones glide through their inspection routines. The Velter trusted their machines completely, another reflection of their rigid perfectionism. No guards protected the core, because their calculations showed the probability of sabotage as effectively zero. They hadn't calculated for human desperation. The device in Marcus's hand was cobbled together from salvaged components, a frequency generator built from comm equipment, power cells from emergency beacons, and quantum resonance chips he'd stolen from damaged repair drones. It wasn't elegant like Velter technology, but it would serve its purpose. Marcus waited until the maintenance cycle ended and the drones retreated to their charging stations. He had 4 to 7 minutes before they returned. He'd memorized their schedule over weeks of observation, moving with practiced silence. He approached the core's access panel. The Velter security protocols were complex but predictable. They relied on biometric scanning, quantum signature verification, and psychological analysis to prevent unauthorized access. But they'd made one critical error. They'd given Marcus authorized access to perform routine maintenance. Their perfect logic couldn't conceive that someone with legitimate clearance might use it maliciously. The access panel responded to his touch, and Marcus began his work. The frequency modulator had to be installed precisely at the core's tertiary harmonic resonance point, the one spot where a minor frequency shift would propagate through the quantum field without triggering immediate alarms. The change would be so gradual that the network's error correction protocols would actually amplify it, spreading the corruption through every connected ship like a virus. As he worked, Marcus thought about the colonies that had already fallen. New Shanghai, where his sister had lived with her children. Kepler Station, where he'd met his wife during their academy days. The Velter had sterilized them efficiently, clinically, without even the dignity of hatred. To them, humans were simply obstacles to be removed. The modulator clicked into place with a soft chime. Marcus activated it and watched as the device's display showed successful integration. With the quantum core, Phase 1 was complete, but this was only the beginning. The frequency shift would take hours to propagate through the network, and even longer to destabilize the entire fleet. He needed to be ready for Phase 2. Marcus made his way back through the maintenance shafts toward the ship's communication array. If his calculations were correct, the Velter would notice the frequency anomaly approximately 6 hours after full propagation, just enough time for him to complete the second part of his plan. In the command center, Velthara reviewed the tactical displays with satisfaction. The human homeworld grew larger on the main screen, a blue-green marble defended by a pathetic collection of ships and orbital platforms. Intelligence reports suggested the humans had fewer than 300 vessels in their entire sole defense fleet, barely enough to crew a single Velter battle group. Estimated time to weapons range? She asked. 14 hours, 17 minutes, Commander. The human fleet is moving to intercept, but their formation is chaotic. Velthara's mandibles clicked in amusement. Humans never learned. They persisted in their individual thinking, their random tactics, their emotional decision-making. The Velter had conquered 17 species by eliminating such inefficiencies. From their military doctrine deep in the ship's bowels, Marcus reached the communication array. Here, he would plant the second phase of his sabotage program that would activate when the network began to destabilize, broadcasting a specific signal on frequencies the Velter used for emergency coordination. The signal would appear to be a legitimate tactical update, but it would actually cause every ship in the fleet to redirect power to their quantum cores simultaneously. When that happened, the already destabilized network would face a massive overload. The perfect synchronization that made the Velter invincible would become the instrument of their destruction. Marcus plugged his improvised transmitter into the communication relay and began the upload. Around him, the ship hummed with deadly efficiency, carrying death toward Earth while the seeds of chaos grew within its quantum heart. The Velter were about to learn that perfection was a double-edged sword. 6 hours and 14 minutes after, Marcus installed the frequency modulator. The first anomaly appeared on Velthara's tactical display, a minor fluctuation in the quantum field, barely registering on the sensors well within normal operational parameters. Technical Officer Velcrim explained this variance. Velthara commanded, pointing at the tiny red indicator that had appeared on her status board. Velcrim's secondary arms danced across his control surfaces as he ran diagnostics. Minor harmonic, drifting quantum core 77 alpha. Commander, the autocorrection protocols are compensating. No action required. Velthara nodded curtly. The Velter quantum network was designed to handle such minor fluctuations. Their technology was robust, redundant, perfect. Still, something about the reading nagged at her consciousness, a feeling she quickly suppressed. Feelings were inefficient, unreliable, human. 3 decks below, Marcus watched the same readings on a salvaged diagnostic tablet. The frequency modulation was spreading exactly as he'd predicted, propagating through the quantum entanglement links like ripples in a pond. The Velter's own error correction systems were unknowingly amplifying the signal, trying to maintain perfect synchronization by adjusting every ship's frequency to match the gradually shifting baseline. Marcus had spent his career designing failsafes for human ships, systems that degraded gracefully when damaged rather than failing catastrophically. The Velter had taken the opposite approach. Their network was so tightly integrated that any systemic failure would affect every component simultaneously. He made his way through the maintenance corridors toward his next target, the ship's power distribution hub. Phase 3 of his plan required him to plant frequency resonators at key points throughout the vessel. When the network finally destabilized, these devices would ensure that this particular ship, the fleet's command node, would be the first to suffer catastrophic failure. The power hub thrummed with barely contained energy. Massive conduits carried power from the ship's 3 fusion reactors to every system aboard, regulated by quantum computers that balance loads with impossible precision. Marcus identified the main distribution manifold and attached his first resonator, a device no larger than his thumb that would amplify specific frequencies. While appearing to be a standard diagnostic sensor dot as he worked, Marcus's mind wandered to the tactical situation. By now, the sole defense fleet would be taking position around Earth, preparing for what everyone assumed would be humanity's final battle. 300 ships against 10,000 odds, so hopeless. That surrender seemed like the only rational choice, but humans had never been rational. They'd fought impossible odds before: Thermopylae, the Alamo, Britain against the Nazi war machine, the colonial marines at Hadley's Hope. Sometimes they lost, sometimes they won, but they never stopped fighting. The Velter couldn't understand this, because they'd optimized emotion out of their species centuries ago. Marcus finished installing the resonator and moved to the next location. Throughout the ship, he could sense the growing tension as more anomalies appeared on the Velter sensors. The network was still functional, still maintaining fleet coordination, but hairline fractures were beginning to appear in their perfect system. On the bridge, Velthara studied the tactical display with growing unease. The quantum variants had spread to 17 ships now, all showing the same minor harmonic drift. The auto-correction protocols were working harder, making constant micro-adjustments to maintain synchronization. "Commander," Velcrim reported, "I'm detecting increased quantum field fluctuations across the fleet, still within operational parameters, but the pattern is unusual. Define unusual." The fluctuations appear to be propagating through the network in a cascade pattern. "Our models don't predict this type of behavior." Velthara's eyes narrowed. Their models were perfect, based on 2 millennia of quantum engineering experience. If the behavior was unprecedented, then something unprecedented was causing it. "Run a full diagnostic on all quantum cores," she ordered. "Priority Alpha." Acknowledged. "Commander, estimated completion time for hours, 12 minutes. For hours that Marcus desperately needed, he'd installed resonators in 6 locations. Now, creating a network of hidden devices that would turn the ship's own power grid against it. The final component was the most dangerous: to install a master control unit in the ship's primary computer core that would coordinate the other devices. When the network collapsed, the computer core was heavily monitored, protected by multiple security layers and constant surveillance. But Marcus had one advantage the Velter hadn't anticipated. He understood their psychology. They thought in terms of systems and protocols, not individual initiative. They expected threats to follow predictable patterns. Marcus had never been predictable. He began the careful crawl through ventilation shafts toward the computer core, carrying the final piece of humanity's desperate gambit. Behind him, the quantum network continued its slow deterioration, each correction cycle amplifying the chaos Marcus had introduced. The Velter Armada still looked invincible on every scanner, every tactical display, but appearances could be deceiving. And Marcus Rivera was about to prove that even the most perfect machine could be destroyed by someone who understood its weaknesses. The computer core of the Dominion's Edge occupied an entire deck, its crystalline processors arranged in perfect geometric patterns that would have made ancient mathematicians weep with envy. Data flowed through quantum pathways at speeds approaching the theoretical maximum, coordinating the actions of 10,000 ships with precision no organic mind could comprehend. Marcus hung from the ventilation grating above the core chamber, watching the light patterns dance through the crystal matrices. Each pulse represented millions of calculations, tactical adjustments, fleet coordination protocols. The Velter had built the ultimate expression of organized warfare, and he was about to turn it into the instrument of their defeat. The master control unit in his hand was the most complex device he'd ever constructed. Built from components salvaged across 3 weeks of careful thievery, it was designed to interface directly with the Veltar quantum computing architecture. When activated, it would coordinate with the resonators he planted throughout the ship, creating a feedback loop that would amplify the frequency distortions. Beyond the network's ability to compensate, security in the core chamber was absolute motion. Sensors, thermal imaging, quantum field detectors, and AI surveillance that could identify threats faster than conscious thought. But Marcus had learned something crucial about Veltar security. They detected anomalies, not authorized personnel performing routine maintenance. Marcus dropped through the ventilation grate. During a scheduled maintenance window, his movements synchronized with the automated systems. Blind spots. He'd memorized every sensor's arc, every patrol drone's route, every security protocol's timing. The Veltar trusted their perfect systems, implicitly a trust Marcus was about to exploit. The central processing node towered above him like a technological cathedral, its crystal surfaces pulsing with the heartbeat of the fleet's command network. Marcus approached the primary interface, his hands steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to attempt. If he failed here, humanity would face extinction. If he succeeded, 10,000 Veltar ships would become 10,000 death traps. The interface accepted his authorization codes without question to the ship's security systems. He was simply performing routine diagnostic maintenance, a task he'd done dozens of times. Over the past 3 weeks, the master control unit slid into the interface socket with a soft click, its alien architecture meshing seamlessly with Veltar quantum processors. Marcus initiated the upload sequence and watched as his sabotage program integrated itself into the ship's core systems. The code was elegant in its simplicity. It would remain dormant until the quantum network reached a specific instability threshold. Then activate every resonator simultaneously while broadcasting the emergency coordination signal he prepared. On the bridge, Veltar watched the diagnostic results with growing alarm. The quantum field variance had spread to over 1,000 ships now, creating a web of instability that pulsed through the fleet like a slow heartbeat. The autocorrection protocols were working at maximum capacity, but they couldn't seem to eliminate the source of the disturbance. Technical Officer Velcrim, I want answers, she snapped. What is causing these fluctuations? Velcrim, as for arms, moved frantically across his control surfaces, pulling up deeper diagnostic layers. Commander, the pattern suggests interference from an external source, but our sensors detect no enemy action, no weapons fire, no electromagnetic anomalies that could cause this effect. Then find the source within our own systems. Run Level 9 diagnostics on every quantum core in the fleet. Commander, Level 9 diagnostics will require temporary shutdown of affected systems. We'll lose fleet coordination for approximately. Do it. The order rippled through the fleet's command network, and Marcus felt the change immediately. The ship's quantum field fluctuated as systems cycled through diagnostic routines, stress testing every component of their perfect network. It was exactly what he'd been waiting for. Marcus activated the master control unit. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Every resonator he'd planted came online simultaneously, their harmonic frequencies perfectly tuned to amplify the quantum field distortions he'd introduced. The ship's power grid became a weapon turned against itself, channeling massive energy surges directly into the quantum core's most vulnerable harmonic resonance points. Throughout the Dominion's edge, crystal matrices began to crack. Quantum processors overloaded as they tried to compensate for impossible frequency variations. The ship's perfect synchronization with the fleet network became a liability, as every connected vessel struggled to match its increasingly chaotic quantum signature. On the bridge, every alarm system activated at once. Display screens shattered as power surges overwhelmed their circuits. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in hellish red as the main power grid fluctuated wildly. Report, Velthara shouted. Over the cacophony of alarms, cascade failure in the quantum network. Velcrim replied, his voice tight with panic and emotion. The Veltar has supposedly eliminated the flagship's quantum signature is destabilizing. All connected ships are attempting autocorrection, but the frequency variance is beyond compensation. Parameters, Velthara stared at the tactical display in horror. Red warning indicators were appearing across the fleet, as ship after ship reported quantum core instabilities. The perfect network that had made them invincible was tearing itself apart, each vessel's attempt to maintain synchronization only accelerating the cascade failure. Cut the quantum links, she ordered. Isolate all ships from the network immediately. Impossible. Commander, the quantum entanglement cannot be severed while the cores are active. Shutdown would require. Velcrim never finished the sentence. The bridge's main display exploded in a shower of sparks as another power surge overloaded its circuits. Throughout the ship, Marcus felt the hull vibrate with harmonic frequencies that no Velter engineering manual had ever contemplated. Phase 4 was beginning, and the perfect Armada was about to discover that chaos could be more powerful than order. The quantum cascade failure spread through the Velter fleet like wildfire through dry grass. Ship after ship reported the same impossible readings. Quantum cores operating beyond theoretical limits, harmonic frequencies shifting faster than their computers could calculate, and power systems fluctuating between overload and complete shutdown. Admiral Velthara's perfect Armada was eating itself alive. Marcus felt the Dominion's edge shudder around him as structural support strained against forces they were never designed to handle. The ship's quantum core was oscillating at frequencies that made the hull ring like a bell, each vibration propagating through the quantum network to every connected vessel. His sabotage had triggered a feedback loop of epic proportions, 10,000 quantum cores, all trying to synchronize with a flagship that was deliberately generating chaos. He made his way through corridors that sparked with electrical discharge, past crew members who stumbled in confusion as their perfect ship betrayed them. The Velter had built their entire civilization around the concept of flawless systems, predictable outcomes, and absolute control. They had no protocols for dealing with deliberate sabotage, because their logic couldn't conceive of someone choosing chaos over order. In the ship's communication center, Marcus activated the final phase of his plan. The transmitter he'd installed weeks ago came online, broadcasting his carefully crafted signal across the fleet's emergency frequencies. To any Velter operator, it would appear to be a legitimate tactical coordination update in order to redirect maximum power to quantum cores to compensate for network instabilities. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Across the fleet, engineering crews followed the apparent order, pouring power into quantum systems that were already operating beyond safe parameters. Ships that had been struggling to maintain stability suddenly found their cores overloaded with energy they couldn't dissipate. The first explosion lit up the darkness of space like a newborn star. The Velter cruiser perfect symmetry simply vanished in a sphere of expanding plasma. As its quantum core achieved critical resonance, the explosion's quantum signature propagated through the network, causing sympathetic overloads in 17 nearby vessels. On the bridge of the flagship, Velthara watched her invincible Armada destroy itself with the methodical precision they'd once applied to conquering enemies. Her four eyes tracked the tactical display as red warning symbols multiplied exponentially. Ships lost to quantum cascade failures, vessels abandoning formation as their navigation systems malfunctioned, entire battle groups going dark as their communication networks collapsed. Status report, she demanded, though the bridge crew could barely hear her over the sound of failing systems and emergency alarms. Fleet cohesion at 4 to 7% and falling, Technical Officer Velcrim shouted back, his perfect composure finally cracking. We've lost direct communication with 63% of the fleet. Quantum network synchronization is impossible while the flagship core remains unstable. Then shut down our quantum core. Commander, shutting down the core while connected to the network will cause, I don't care what it will cause. Do it. Velcrim's hands trembled, another impossible emotion as he initiated the shutdown sequence. But it was too late. The quantum entanglement couldn't be severed while the network was actively trying to synchronize. Every attempt to isolate the flagship only caused more violent fluctuations in the connected ships. Marcus felt the deck plates beneath his feet vibrate with increasing violence as he made his way toward the emergency shuttle bays. The Dominion's edge was dying around him, its perfect systems locked in a battle they couldn't win against the chaos he'd introduced. But his work wasn't finished yet. The shuttle bay was in emergency lockdown, but Marcus had prepared for this contingency. He'd spent weeks studying Velter emergency protocols, learning their evacuation procedures, memorizing their security override codes. The bay doors responded to his commands, recognizing him as authorized maintenance personnel with legitimate access. As he powered up a maintenance shuttle, Marcus could see the destruction spreading through the fleet on the craft's sensor displays. Explosions bloomed throughout the Armada as ship after ship succumbed to quantum cascade failures. The Velter's perfect network had become a weapon of mutual destruction. each vessel's death throes propagating through the quantum links to accelerate the collapse of their neighbors. The shuttle's launch bay opened, and Marcus piloted the small craft into space. Behind him, the Dominion's edge was beginning to break apart, its hull cracking along stress fractures caused by impossible harmonic resonances around him. The greatest military force in galactic history was tearing itself apart with mechanical precision, but the most important part of Marcus's plan was still ahead. The Velter fleet might be destroying itself, but scattered survivors would escape, regroup, and eventually return with new tactics and improved technology to truly save humanity. He needed to ensure that this disaster would teach the galaxy's other species a crucial lesson: humans were not to be underestimated. Marcus set course for the Soul Defense Fleet, knowing that the final act of this drama would determine not just Earth's survival, but humanity's place in the galactic community. The Velter had thought their Armada was flawless. They were about to learn that sometimes the greatest strength lay in embracing imperfection. Admiral Helena Cross stood on the bridge of the battleship Indomitable, watching the impossible unfold on her tactical displays. The Velter fleet, the unstoppable force that had crushed 17 civilizations, was disintegrating before her eyes. Ships exploded in cascading chain reactions, their quantum cores achieving critical resonance in perfect synchronization with their destruction. Admiral, her tactical officer reported, voice tight with disbelief, "We're reading massive quantum field disruptions throughout the enemy fleet. They appear to be destroying themselves." Cross had commanded the Soul Defense Fleet for 8 years, fighting a losing war against an enemy that seemed invincible. She'd watched the Velter obliterate human colonies with clinical efficiency, their perfect formations and flawless coordination making every battle a foregone conclusion. Now, with Earth itself under threat, the impossible was happening. "Sensor analysis," she demanded. "Unknown, Admiral. The quantum signatures are unlike anything in our databases. The cascade failures appear to be propagating through their network somehow, but we have no idea what's causing it." Cross studied the tactical display with the eye of someone who'd spent decades fighting impossible odds. The Velter formation was collapsing, but not randomly. There was a pattern to the destruction, centered on their flagship and spreading outward through what appeared to be their command network. "Ma'am," her communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission on emergency frequencies. Source appears to be a small craft launching from the Velter flagship. Put it through." The main screen flickered, and Cross found herself looking at a human face she didn't recognize, a man in his 40s with grease-stained coveralls and eyes that held the weight of terrible knowledge. "This is Chief Engineer Marcus Rivera, formerly of the cruiser Defiance," the man said. "I'm transmitting tactical data on Velter fleet composition and current vulnerabilities. Their quantum network is in cascade failure. Now's your chance to finish them." Cross felt her heart rate spike. A human saboteur aboard the enemy flagship had explained everything. "Rivera, what's your status?" "I'm clear of the flagship in a commandeered shuttle. The Dominion's edge will be gone in approximately 12 minutes, when their quantum core achieves critical resonance. But Admiral, listen carefully. Scattered survivors will escape this engagement. If we let them regroup, they'll adapt their technology and come back stronger. We need to make this victory decisive." Cross understood immediately. The Velter thought in terms of adaptation and optimization. They would analyze this defeat, identify the vulnerabilities Marcus had exploited, and return with countermeasures. Unless humanity made sure there were no survivors to carry that knowledge back to their homeworld. "All ships, this is Admiral Cross," she broadcast to the Soul Defense Fleet. "We have a narrow window to exploit enemy vulnerabilities. Battle plan: Gamma Hunter killer formations, target survival craft and disabled vessels. No Velter ship leaves this system." The human fleet responded with the chaotic efficiency that had kept them alive against impossible odds. 300 ships broke formation and scattered throughout the battlefield, their crews adapting to the changing tactical situation with the flexibility that came from years of desperate fighting. Marcus watched from his stolen shuttle as humanity's fleet moved through the disintegrating Velter Armada like sharks in a feeding frenzy. Human ships were individually inferior to Velter vessels in every measurable way: weaker armor, slower drives, less sophisticated weapons. But they had advantages that couldn't be quantified: creativity, adaptability, and the desperate courage of a species fighting for its survival. The cruiser Retribution swooped through the wreckage of a Velter battle group, its railguns picking off escape pods and damaged vessels that might otherwise have limped away. The destroyer Relentless coordinated with 2 frigates to corner a Velter cruiser, whose quantum core had destabilized but not yet exploded, their combined firepower overwhelming its weakened shields. Throughout the battlefield, similar scenes played out as the human fleet capitalized on the chaos Marcus had created. Ships that had seemed untouchable hours ago were now vulnerable prey, their perfect coordination replaced by confusion and system failures. On the dying Dominion's edge, Velthara felt her perfect worldview crumble along with her ship. The bridge was a ruin of sparking electronics and failing systems, her crew struggling to maintain basic life support. As the quantum core's harmonics tore the vessel apart from within, Commander Velkrim reported, his voice barely audible over the sounds of structural collapse. Long-range sensors show human vessels throughout the fleet engagement zone. They're targeting our survivors. Velthara's mandibles clicked in something that might have been admiration. If her species had retained such emotions, the humans weren't just exploiting the cascade failure, they were ensuring that no Velter ship would escape to report on their vulnerability. It was a level of tactical thinking she hadn't expected from a chaotic species. Send a priority transmission to the homeworld, she ordered. Full tactical analysis of this engagement. The humans are more dangerous than we calculated, Commander. Communications are offline. The quantum network collapse severed all long-range links. The irony wasn't lost on Velthara. Their perfect communication system, designed to coordinate fleet actions across galactic distances, had become their downfall. No warning would reach the Velter homeworld. No analysis of human capabilities would inform future strategies. The knowledge would die with her fleet. Marcus piloted his shuttle toward the human fleet, broadcasting identification codes and requesting permission to come aboard. Behind him, the Dominion's edge finally succumbed to the forces he'd unleashed, its quantum core achieving critical resonance in an explosion that could be seen from Earth's surface. The cascade failure was complete. The perfect Armada was gone. But Marcus knew that the real victory wasn't in the destruction of ships or the death of enemies. It was in the message this battle would send throughout the galaxy. Humanity had faced extinction and found a way to turn their enemy's greatest strength into their greatest weakness. Word of this victory would spread, and other species would think twice before assuming humans were easy prey. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, Marcus Rivera stood before the Galactic Council on Nexus Station, his testimony echoing through the vast chamber where representatives of 47 species debated the future of interstellar relations. The holographic displays around the chamber showed the wreckage field that still orbited Earth. 10,000 Velter ships reduced to scrap metal and radiation signatures. The Velter believed their network was invincible, Marcus explained to the assembled delegates, his voice carrying to every corner of the amphitheater. They had optimized their military doctrine over to millennia, eliminating every inefficiency, every weakness, every unpredictable element. What they didn't understand was that their perfection itself had become their greatest vulnerability. The Velter delegate, one of only a few dozen survivors from the entire invasion fleets, asked silent in the chamber's witness section. Commander Velthara had somehow escaped the destruction of her flagship, and her testimony had shaken the Council's understanding of military strategy. The human Saboteur exploited a single point of failure, she had admitted earlier, her voice hollow with defeat. Our quantum network required perfect synchronization across all nodes. By introducing controlled chaos into one ship, he turned our entire fleet into a cascade failure waiting to happen. It was elegant in its simplicity. Marcus continued his explanation, watching the alien faces in the audience process the implications. The Velter made the same mistake that many advanced civilizations make. They assume that order and predictability were inherently superior to chaos and adaptability. They couldn't conceive that someone might deliberately introduce instability into their perfect system. The Altarian representative, her crystalline form flickering with nervous energy, asked the question that had been haunting the Council for months. Chief Rivera, your actions saved not just humanity, but potentially every species in this chamber. The Velter had planned to extend their conquest beyond human space, but the method you used it required someone with intimate knowledge of their technology, someone they trusted enough to grant maintenance access. How did you know their systems well enough to exploit them? Marcus smiled grimly. I'm an engineer. I've spent my career designing systems that can fail gracefully when damaged, rather than catastrophically. When I studied Velter technology, I realized they'd taken the opposite approach. They created systems so tightly integrated that any systemic failure would affect every component simultaneously. Their network was incredibly efficient when it worked perfectly, but it had no ability to adapt when things went wrong. The revelation had sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Species that had considered the Velter unstoppable suddenly realized that their military doctrine contained inherent weaknesses. More importantly, they began to understand that humanity's apparent chaos and unpredictability weren't signs of primitive thinking. They were adaptive advantages. In the months following the battle, humanity's status in galactic politics had changed dramatically. The species that had dismissed humans as backward primitives now sought them out as allies, recognizing that their unconventional thinking could provide solutions to problems that traditional logic couldn't solve. Trade agreements materialized overnight. Technology exchanges that had been impossible suddenly became routine. The same human unpredictability that had once marked them as inferior now made them valuable partners in a galaxy full of rigidly logical species. Admiral Cross, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and head of humanity's Galactic Defense Force, had established humanity's first interstellar military academy on Luna. Species from across the galaxy sent their officers to study human tactical doctrine, trying to understand how chaos could be weaponized against order. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The Battle of Soul had demonstrated that perfection was not an absolute good, that systems designed to eliminate all uncertainty and unpredictability could be turned against themselves by someone who understood their limitations. Marcus finished his testimony and stepped down from the witness stand, but his mind was already on the future. Humanity had won a great victory, but it had also revealed themselves to be far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. That reputation would protect them from future aggressors, but it would also create new challenges as other species struggled to understand a race that thrive on controlled chaos. As he walked through the corridors of Nexus Station, Marcus passed delegation members from dozens of species, many of whom stopped to acknowledge him with gestures of respect. The human who had single-handedly destroyed the galaxy's most powerful fleet had become a legend, but he carried the weight of that legend carefully. The universe was vast and full of threats that humanity hadn't yet encountered. There would be other perfect systems to exploit, other seemingly invincible enemies to defeat, other moments when chaos would prove stronger than order. Marcus had shown that it was possible, but each victory would require new insights, new approaches, new ways of thinking about the relationship between order and chaos. In his quarters aboard the human embassy ship, Marcus sat at his desk writing the final chapter of his technical report on Velter quantum network vulnerabilities. The document would be classified at the highest levels, shared only with humanity's closest allies, but it represented something more than just tactical intelligence. It was proof that even the most advanced technology could be defeated by someone who understood its fundamental assumptions. A soft chime announced an incoming message, and Marcus looked up to see Admiral Cross's face on his communication screen. Marcus, we've received word from the outer colonies. The hegemony of HFY has requested a formal alliance with humanity. They're offering full technology sharing in exchange for military consultation on defensive strategies. Marcus raised an eyebrow. The HFY were known throughout the galaxy for their obsession with military perfection. Their fleets organized with mathematical precision that rivaled even the Velter. They wanted to learn how to defend against their own tactics. Exactly. They watched what happened at Sol, and they realized that their military doctrine has the same vulnerabilities the Velter had. They want human advisors to help them build chaos into their systems, controlled unpredictability that can't be exploited by future enemies. It was a strange request, but Marcus understood the logic. The HFY were smart enough to recognize that their pursuit of perfection had made them vulnerable to the same type of sabotage he'd used against the Velter. They were willing to sacrifice some efficiency in exchange for resilience. I'll consider it, Marcus said, but first, I want to finish documenting everything we learned from the Velter engagement. If we're going to help other species defend themselves, we need to understand exactly how their systems fail. Cross nodded. Take your time. The galaxy's not going anywhere, and neither are we. As the communication ended, Marcus returned to his work, but his thoughts drifted to the broader implications of humanity's victory. The Battle of Sol had been more than just a military engagement. It had been a fundamental shift in how the galaxy understood the relationship Between order and chaos, perfection and adaptability, the Welter had represented the ultimate expression of organized warfare, their fleets moving with clockwork precision across the stars. They had conquered 17 civilizations by eliminating uncertainty from their military doctrine, by creating systems so perfect that they seemed unbeatable. But perfection, Marcus had learned, was a trap. Systems designed to handle every predictable scenario became vulnerable to the unpredictable. Networks optimized for flawless operation couldn't adapt when someone introduced deliberate chaos. The Welter's greatest strength had become their greatest weakness, and a single human engineer with a toolbox full of improvised devices had brought down their entire armada. The irony was beautiful in its simplicity, the chaotic, unpredictable. Humans had defeated the perfect, ordered Welter by turning their own perfection against them. It was a lesson that would echo through the galaxy for generations, a reminder that adaptation and flexibility were often more valuable than efficiency and precision. Marcus finished his report as the embassy ship entered hyperspace, carrying humanity's delegation back to Earth. Outside his window, the stars stretched into brilliant lines, and he thought about the future those stars held. There would be other threats, other perfect systems to exploit, other moments when human ingenuity would be the difference between survival and extinction. But for now, humanity had earned its place among the stars. They had proven that they were more than just another primitive species struggling to survive. They were the chaos factor in a galaxy full of ordered systems, the unpredictable element that could turn any perfect plan into a catastrophic failure. The Welter Armada had been flawless until one human saboteur found the weak link, and in finding it, Marcus Rivera had not only saved his species, he had changed the fundamental nature of warfare itself. The galaxy would never be the same.